The final thing to kind of keep in mind here too is what if there's a problem? As you're going through this interaction on the new infrastructure, if there's something that comes up that you didn't foresee or something that's unique about this new scenario that you've created for yourself, you always have the ability. Hey friends, Bart here. I'm going through an interesting change in my life right now. The family and I are moving from one house to another, and in these transformational times where there's all sorts of change around, things can get a little crazy and things can get a little stressful as well. This is not unlike the cloud computing world when we think about how we're going to transform applications, make updates to them, migrate them between various states of existence, or move them through a lifecycle change. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit about a very important cloud computing concept known as blue-green deployment, where we take the old existing infrastructure, systems or services, bring up a new set of tools and services with updates or new features included in them, and then we switch traffic back and forth between the two, confirming that the new one's good, and then turning off the old one. This is a very powerful pattern, and it works across a whole bunch of different services within the AWS space and, of course, across other cloud computing worlds as well. So stick with me as we dig into the world of blue-green deployments. Woo! All right, so to dig into the blue-green deployment topic here, the first thing we really have to understand is what is the problem with doing traditional updates. Now, in the old days, what we would typically do is something called an inline update, which is where you would go to the systems that everybody's currently interacting with, your users, your customers, your businesses are interacting with, apply the update there during some sort of a service window. So maybe you tell everybody, hey, we're going to be making a change, so watch out after 10 p.m. tonight. The system's going down while we make updates to it. Now, of course, the problems there is that you're talking about an outage. You're talking about a situation in which when you make that update, the system itself is the only one that you have there. If that update goes wrong, I know, hard to believe that an update may go wrong, but if that update does go wrong, you have the ability maybe to roll the update back, but in a lot of situations, changes that we make to applications, especially between major version changes, they can be particularly invasive and catastrophic. Not to mention the notion that we also have data constructs that we might have to deal with in the background, things like database schemas, and we'll talk more about that here in just a sec. So the first big problem we have here is that when we make an update to the one and only working stack that we have out there, we're taking a big gamble. We're rolling the dice, and we are hoping that all of our developer testing and operations testing that we've done in the background leaves us with a good workable system after that update. And again, as you might imagine, that is rife with potential for problems for us in the operations world. And so one of the original ways that we might try to do this would be to deploy it on a test stack. This also has its own problems. Keep in mind, your friends, when we talk about a test stack, typically this is not, even with our best efforts, it's not the actual production infrastructure we're running on. And often it's even a subset of that. Remember that if for a lot of organizations, if you're doing this in your own data centers, you're running it on your own infrastructure, and the idea that you can build everything in duplicate at the bare minimum could become cost prohibitive for you, or it could be completely unrealistic, again, because of some of those dependencies on things like the working data set that might be driving the application. So we have got ourselves a hot mess of opportunities to cause problems as well. So when we look at the blue-green deployment model, we are saying, how about this? Instead of deploying it onto the actual current infrastructure, so we go ahead and draw our current infrastructure that's on here, and this is the one that people are actively interacting with. So we imagine maybe this is like a website where users are currently browsing, they're using the mobile app, they're otherwise interacting with that infrastructure. And that means that if we make changes to it, it's going to cause a problem, a potential disruption for us. So blue-green says instead of interacting with it at the current one and making the update directly on that infrastructure, instead, let's build a new piece of infrastructure and deploy the updates there instead. So this is an interesting option. Instead of going there, we're going to run it over here on the new infrastructure. So the first basic principle here is instead of running it on the original existing one, we create a new stack of some sort. Now I'm using these terms generically here. It could be almost any sort of infrastructure you're talking about, but in the end, you try to build it as close to as duplicate in production as possible. Now, hopefully some of you were saying, well, wait a minute, isn't that cost prohibitive for us? You're right. And if we're talking about using cloud services like what Amazon Web Services offers us, then we are taking solace in knowing that we don't have to run the infrastructure permanently in duplicate. Once we validate that the new system is working properly, we're going to turn off the old existing current one and send users over to the new environment. So this kind of brings us to our second concern. Concern one was run the update on new infrastructure first. Okay. The second concern then is test the new infrastructure. So this gives us an opportunity then to go through and actually run maybe a sample of users and send some traffic into the new infrastructure, test it out and evaluate it here. Okay, now this gives us a good solid opportunity to find any problems, any bugs, any loopholes or gotchas that might be waiting for us to fall into. Of course, as you might imagine here, friends, again, there are some limitations to how effective this can be. If you're talking about a database or some sort of configurational change on a shared component in the background, those have to be addressed separately. But in a lot of scenarios, this does give us a lot of big wins. Once we run that sample through there and we confirm that the new infrastructure is working, the final step then is to redirect user interactions over to the new infrastructure so that they can then begin interacting with the updated sets of tools, updated feature set, and the updated options that we've deployed there as well. So the interesting pattern that we create then is an opportunity to deploy a new infrastructure, to test and validate that it's working well, and then very easy ways or granular ways of controlling when we actually transition users back and forth. Keep in mind, we could do this during a service window just to give ourselves a little extra coverage, and then choose later on to switch over traffic at a time of our choosing. So in the end, as an operations person, this is a beautiful amount of insulation from having to do this on quote unquote production infrastructure. Now you've got this staging opportunity and this ability to kind of quarantine and control that interaction. The final thing to kind of keep in mind here too is what if there's a problem? As you're going through this interaction on the new infrastructure, if there's something that comes up that you didn't foresee or something that's unique about this new scenario that you've created for yourself, you always have the ability to disable that and go back to the original current infrastructure that you used to have running and working in your environment. So this is that parachute. This is our chance to say, oh crap, something went wrong. Let's go back and try it on the original infrastructure. Let's go back to the dev teams and cycle through this a little bit more until we can get the new deployment working properly. So all in all, blue-green deployments are a very simple principle. You can do it on a single server, one server with a new one. You could do it on stacks of servers where there's different layers. You could do it by creating multiple load balancers, multiple new scaling groups. You could also do this using CloudFormation stacks or Beanstalk environments or OpsWorks stacks. The point is that by using this model here, we are insulating ourselves from some of the risk of doing these changes on the fly, improving the quality of that transition, and of course, still getting to deploy those updates. Recognizing too here, friends, when we talk about the agile principles of regularly deploying updates, you better believe this is going to be a common issue for us and something that we're going to be running into on a regular basis. Having to reduce the amount of times the service windows are required to improve the availability of updates is a really important principle to making sure that we're entertaining updates and making sure things keep getting deployed for our users out there as well. So I hope that this helps you understand the blue-green deployment model out there. Keep in mind that this applies across dozens of different types of examples within AWS, all of which we'll talk about more in future Cloud Bart lessons. So stick with it, friends. Remember to try the new blue-green deployment options out there. And remember that this is not an AWS specific option. So try it out, keep yourself safe, and we'll see you in the cloud.